I was sharing really a testimony at the Ignite on Friday night. That Ignite is the young adults that meet about every other Friday for praise or worship and a little bit of fellowship. You're invited. I get to go because I can give a testimony, but if you're young, you can go. Friday night. But what I was talking to them about was how my own faith had developed, and I don't think it's so unusual. I think it is the way that many people's faith or understanding of God develops. When I was a child, I was really focused on God in general, so to speak. You could say the Father, but my parents, my mother had taught me to pray, and I followed the example in school. And so God was very real to me. But it was God in general, as you might say, the Father, creator of all. And right up through the time when I went to college, my first year at university, someone had given me a New Testament, and it was in my first year at the university that I began to read for myself the New Testament. And that was for me an eye-opener. Of course, obviously, growing up in the faith, I'd heard about Jesus all the time, right? But then I began, in reading the scriptures and in reflecting on them, I began to fall in love with Jesus. I began to know him in a personal way. Like the second reading says, no one can say Jesus is Lord except in the Holy Spirit. I guess God was active. It wasn't just reading it, as you might read a novel. It was somehow being drawn into the person of Christ. Not just the Gospels, but the letters of Paul and the other parts of the New Testament. And so I really fell in love with Jesus. And it wasn't until later in my education, just before perhaps I was going to be ordained a deacon, that the Holy Spirit, the reality of God, the Holy Spirit became more real to me. Obviously, like you, we always sign ourselves in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. But I began to realize that it was this Holy Spirit that empowers our response. In the letter to the Galatians, we could have used that reading today from Galatians, but he talks about the fruits of the Holy Spirit. And he says that the fruits of the Holy Spirit, the presence of the Holy Spirit, is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those aspects, whenever you see them, that is the action of God in your life. So I must say that now, in the third stage of my spirituality, that it is the Holy Spirit that is so real to me every day. When I find that I'm able to bear with patience things that normally I would not, I know it's the action of the Holy Spirit. When kindness comes, when I'm not in the mood, I really know that's God working. And so it becomes possible in every moment, as long as we're cooperating with God's grace, to experience the active power of God working in us through the Holy Spirit in those fruits. Every time I'm able to exercise a little bit of self-control, I know it's God that's empowering me. And so I must say that the reality of the Holy Spirit that we celebrate today, coming down on Pentecost, is the lived daily reality. It takes nothing away from my love of Jesus. It takes nothing away from my loving response to God the Father, God in general. But to see it every day is a blessing. Now, I know that my saying it doesn't necessarily translate, really, does it? You can say, well, he's in the business. But let me tell tell you what I think the key, this is not something that's for me or for just a few. This is the reality of your baptism. The fullness of these children receive when they receive the body and blood of Christ today at the Eucharist. But it is for all of us. These fruits are meant to be for all of us. The living impulse of God's action in our life. But I think if we are not experiencing it, I don't think it's the lack of God working in our life. You have to, in a way, step out, as this gospel today is. When Jesus comes to them, as John tells the story of the giving of the Spirit, they're afraid, they're bound up, they're locked in. And the first thing he says to them is, peace be with you. And then he says it again to them, knowing perhaps they've been traumatized by his death and resurrection, not able to appreciate it. But then he says, peace be with you, as the Father sent me, so I send you. I think that is the key to releasing the realization of the Holy Spirit in our life, is to step out. That we need to, in a sense, be the bearer of that. And we need to do it consciously. And it doesn't have to be in huge areas of our life. None of us needs to become a missionary today and go off. But we can step out, and it's in stepping out that we allow these fruits of the Holy Spirit, whether it's love, or joy, or peace, or patience, or kindness, to begin to realize that is the impulse of God. But as long as we're kind of bound up, we're in a defensive, well-defended position, or maybe even fear has bound us in, we aren't able. It doesn't mean that God is inactive, but we're unable to really begin to experience the Holy Spirit. So I invite you, not simply in church, but when you're with whoever you're with today, to begin to step out in testimony. Baby steps, but begin to take it. And when you return to work on Tuesday, begin to exercise that in that environment, in small ways. And you will experience, undoubtedly, how real is the presence of God in your life. Because it is God's action, but somehow if we're bound in, we're not aware. We're kind of reflecting it off. So I invite you to take it, to receive the Holy Spirit, so to speak, the action of the Holy Spirit in your life, by the actions of loving kindness, forgiveness, peace, patience, and all the other things. And I have no doubt that you, like me, will be amazed at how active God is in your life. How powerful He is to get you and me beyond our normal humanity into a living life of Christ in our life. And that's the power that you saw happen as the description of Pentecost in the first reading. Terrified Galileans begin to testify to the world. That's the action of Christ in them. And that is the action of Christ in us when we begin to testify and live in the world. So let it go a little bit. Do it, and don't wait until Tuesday. Start today. You've got the families here for First Communion. Step out in love. Step out in love. Step out in peace and patience. And then rejoice in the presence